Yeah, it's definitely a more modern approach to meditation, and it takes into account what you're going through. So if you're going through like burnout or stress or anxiety or something like that, that will show up in your body, but you will learn from that and then be able what you learn from your listening to your body and feeling, that will help you navigate your life
Okay.
based on how you're feeling in that particular moment, rather than with a thought-based approach. It's like, well, I've got to get here and I'm not happy that I'm anxious, so I need to change it. Whereas with this approach, it's like, okay, it's a way more gentle approach. It's like, okay, I've got a lot of anxiety or I'm burnt out, so I need to respond to my body and how I'm going inside of myself in every action in my life. I mean, the thing is about this approach is nobody has ever told you this. Nobody has ever told
No.
you to feel your feelings. Everybody and the whole of society is structured to disconnect you from your feelings, to keep you distracted, to give you things that drug you out and numb you out. So it's perfectly understandable that people are numb, but there is a way. What we're offering is a way out of that.
Hey, welcome to this week's episode of The Freedom Experience. I'm your host, John Moncrief. Today, we're stepping into a different kind of conversation, one that goes beyond business, strategy, and leadership. And we're talking about meditation. Now, I've dabbled with meditation over the years. I've tried to make it a part of my daily practice. And sometimes I succeed, sometimes not so much. And that's strange because I know I'm more centered and productive when I meditate. But like most things, we're inundated with different approaches and different meditation apps, and I suspect that's part of my problem. And I've been getting the feeling that maybe these apps are just kind of quick fixes. So I wanted to bring somebody onto the show who truly understands meditation, not just as a technique, but as a way of reconnecting mind and body. So my guest today is Cate Zoltan. She's the founder and the CEO of the Undo app. And Cate has spent over 27 years studying meditation and healing from trauma using what she calls natural meditation. So her journey started as a personal search for healing, and today she helps others to reconnect with their bodies and their minds in ways that different from the traditional techniques that we're often kind of associate with meditation. So in this conversation, we explore, first of all, the difference between natural meditation and the structured technique-based meditation many of us are used to or tried. We explore the connection between body and mind and why stress, anxiety, and even physical pain are signals that we need to listen rather than suppress, and why pursuing a monk-like meditation approach in a modern world might not be the best approach for all of us. So this is a really fascinating discussion that challenged my own understanding of meditation, and I think you're going to learn a lot from it. Let's dive in with Cate. Cate, welcome to the show. Thanks for taking the time to join us. Lovely to have you on today.
Yeah, really nice to be here, Sean.
Cool. So I've over the last few days, I've read your white paper and tried to understand the approach to meditation that you folks follow. But I think the key thing that it opened up for me is that not all meditations are sort of born equal. And I'd love to start with that with you, just to talk to you a little bit about how you're different from, I guess, the more religious, philosophical based meditations, and how you folks differ. And start there.
Yeah, definitely. So there are many types of meditation, but we tend to categorize meditations into two different piles, basically. So because we are actually a totally new and unique type of meditation, like nobody knows anything about this one. That's why it's quite hard to build your business quickly with this one, because there's a lot of education behind this actual approach. And also, people don't tend to understand like why they're struggling with a particular type of meditation. And they also don't understand that there are different types of meditation. Maybe they know that there's Vipassana, or there's mindfulness, or there's Zen, or TM, or breath
Yeah.
work, all of that. They know all the different types in that regard, but what they don't really understand is there's two categories. So the way that we categorize it is there's two types of meditation. That one is the body-based meditation, which is what we're about, which is the inside-out approach. And then there's the outside-in approach, or the technique, and what we would cloud as like thought-based meditation. We put they're all in the one category. So anything that's an outside-in approach, anything that's additional to yourself and not coming
Okay.
from the inside of you, is a technique. So techniques are all of the ones that are available out there up until our approach has come about. So the main distinction between the two really is that the techniques are all based in thought. So the thought is by nature superficial, and thought is by nature it's just wants to replicate, repeat, and copy itself, just in order for it to, like a survival mechanism. It just wants
Okay.
to, if you're not thinking, then that thought does not exist. And so therefore it's something that you have to continuously do to keep alive. Whereas the body and the body-based meditation is all about inside of you, understanding yourself and understanding the uniqueness and the knowledge that you are in, like really deep inside of you, and the feelings inside of yourself. So you learn how to feel again. So it's more of an experience rather than it's an experience that is inside of yourself, that you're getting to understand yourself. Whereas the technique and the outside in approach is an experience that you're creating and adding to yourself. So it's not actually you. It's an easy way to explain it is, if you're doing a Buddhist meditation, then you're going to end up like a Buddhist, because the essence of that technique is Buddhism, and
Okay.
Buddhism has a specific feeling about it. So, when I don't know if you've bumped into a Buddhist monk or something like this in the street, and there's a feeling about them, and then you bump into another one, and there's generally a feeling about them. And that is because of the thinking pattern and the structure of the technique that they're using is Buddhist. And so that feeling because they're continuously using this pattern and this technique of thought and applying it to themselves, that technique gets stuck through, or not stuck, but impregnated throughout their whole body
Okay.
and whole system. So that's the feeling that comes from using that technique. Whereas if you're just feeling the feelings that are inside of you and resolving them and not adding anything to that, then that meditation is all about you. It's not about a technique and trying to attain anything or reach a certain goal. It's intrinsically about you and gaining a deeper understanding of you. And within that, also, I'll add to that, additional to that, there is no goal. Like for the Buddhist, enlightenment is the goal. For
Okay.
a natural meditation person, there is no goal. It's you sit still and your body will show you what it needs, you're really like listening to your body. So you're going deep inside, feeling the feelings, and whatever arises for you on that day, in that moment, that is your meditation. So it's not about being calm. It's just about feeling how you're feeling on a given day. Sort of like when I don't know if you're going to do a big lift at the gym or something like that, you sort of have a warm up and feel how you're, like if you're going to do a deadlift or something like that,
Yeah.
you want to feel how your back is before you go and lift heavy weight. So it's sort of like that. You're feeling your way through your body and just letting whatever arises and feel the feeling behind that. And not
As opposed to going looking for it.
Yeah,
as opposed to actually
exactly.
consciously kind of scanning the body and thinking about,
Yes.
kind of almost going up and looking for pain or uncomfort in the
Yeah.
body. You're just
Yeah.
waiting for it to arise. So it almost feels like on the one hand, we've got meditation practices that are, as you say, might come from this sort of Buddhist realm and Buddhist monks, and we're trying to kind of copy that approach, but we live in a very different world, a very different lifestyle, and that might not really fit with the way we actually live as modern human beings in cities and jobs and work, as opposed to Buddhists who spend most of their time meditating in in a monastery. So
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, it's definitely a more modern approach to meditation, and it takes into account what you're going through. So if you're going through like burnout or stress or anxiety or something like that, that will show up in your body, but you will learn from that and then be able what you learn from your listening to your body and feeling, that will help you navigate your life
okay,
based on how you're feeling in that particular moment, rather than with a thought-based approach. It's like, well, I've got to get here and I'm not happy that I'm anxious, so I need to change it. Whereas with this approach, it's like, okay, it's a way more gentle approach. It's like, okay, I've got a lot of anxiety or I'm burnt out, so I need to respond to my body and how I'm going inside of myself in every action in my life accordingly. So in that way, it's a very gentle approach, but at the same time, there's not really any force or harm involved, because you're just really being understanding of yourself, listening to what your body's telling you and responding from that. So you're responding from intelligence and understanding, as opposed to, okay, I've got to do this. Not saying that that's not intelligent and understanding, just saying that a goal is a goal, and you can really override yourself if you set yourself goals,
yeah.
because they can become very harmful if you're not understanding and empathetic towards yourself.
So there's almost an infinite mindset to your approach versus a more finite mindset to right now I need some energy, or I've got a pain somewhere, or I feel a bit anxious. So let me go and find a meditation that will address that specific issue, which is kind of almost a finite approach. And at the end of the day, you aren't really kind of dealing with the root issues. Whereas yours is the approach that you folks have through Undo is a much more holistic, kind of longer term approach, infinite approach to this. It's that work is never really done, and we keep moving forward. And I feel like that's part of the challenge when we approach meditation, that we're trying to solve for some kind of problem right now, but we're not sort of building the practice into our lives properly.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about also, it brings up the issue, I guess, of where are you coming from? Like, where are you coming from in wanting to change yourself in the first place? Because if you're wanting to change yourself from what you are today, then you also have a, a part of you is judging that you're not good enough as you are.
Yeah,
So, I mean, how can you even judge that you're not good enough as you are compared to what? What is that about? Like, if you have understanding about why you're anxious, or why, if people have had trauma and they get different, that trauma is a very complex um, effect that happens within a person. There's many different attitudes and behaviors and all sorts of things that come from that. But if you're just condemning yourself and thinking that you need to be better and you need to change, and not taking into account what's actually happened to you, there's no, again, it comes back to that, like, empathy for yourself. If there's not empathy for yourself, then you're just hammering yourself constantly, like, I've got to change, I've got to change, I've got to change, and that is actually not going to change anything. So for me, it comes back to, where are you coming from, or where is
yeah.
a person coming from in asking or wanting to change? Because there's from our approach, there's nothing wrong with you as you are. Like if you've had a big effect from somebody and you don't have any like unresolved feelings or effects or behaviors from that, if you've been brought up in a really abusive childhood or something like that, it has an effect. If it doesn't have an effect, then you're deemed psychotic,
Yeah.
but people are still, still wanting to change. So they're expecting themselves to be okay with the worst behavior in the world, and you should not be okay with the worst behaviors in the world. You really just need to understand that there's an effect, and so I need to live with myself as I am until I can resolve, or that effect changes, or you understand yourself enough to change that behavior, but not from the approach of there's something wrong with me. So there's a huge difference between the two. One approach is like you say, is resolvable and open ended, whereas the other approach is like, no, we've got to change and we've got to become this. So it's limited and closed.
And trying to find those quick fixes that we're so good at sort of pursuing as human beings. It's like, how do I fix me right now, as
Yeah.
opposed to I'm right here where I need to be right now. This is the next stage in the journey, and that's where I'm kind of going. Great.
Yes.
I'm really curious as well. So I never thought about the disconnect between the mind and the body, and I'd love to understand that more and sort of share that with the audience. I think we sort of go into meditation, for whatever reason, and thinking for me it was about taking some quiet time, calmness. But I never thought about this disconnect between the mind and the body, and I always just thought I was doing mind and body work sort of thing. But I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that and go into a little bit more detail about what that means.
Yeah, definitely. So, where do I start? I suppose the way that we approach things. Well, firstly, actually, people don't, I guess, tend to understand that things like anxiety and stress really are. They're not actually mental conditions. So we've been taught to think of them as a mental condition, even though it's really not. Because if you've got anxiety or stress, you always feel it somewhere in your body. If you've got
Yeah.
anxiety, it's going to be somewhere in your throat or in your chest or in your stomach. Same with stress. Stress is actually a little bit different. So I'll just stick to anxiety. But what has happened is we've really been conditioned to believe that with this mind or brain or whatever consciousness is a separate entity to ourselves, when in actual fact it's not. Because if when we don't exist, the mind doesn't exist. Nobody really knows that consciousness still exists once we die. No, that's not provable.
Yeah.
But what we know is that we are not cognitive once we die. So we've been taught to separate the mind from the body over the generations, but we're questioning that. And so we're
Okay.
asking you to question that as well. But the biggest benefit of just being open to this is that our body is a super intelligent organism. Like, look at all the animals, look at everything that survives for, millions and millions of years, and we're one of them. We can get through without as much thinking and without as much input from the mind as we're led to believe. So we're all, self-important, and we think that we can't get through life we can't solve our problems without thinking about them. We worry and we get concerned and have become stressy, and we pressurize ourselves, push ourselves to do things because our thinking thinks that we can't do anything without the thinking. But it's like it comes back to the nature of thought again. It's just a replication. So the way that we understand it, or I understand it from this approach that my husband discovered, is the body and the mind are exactly the same thing, because all of your thoughts arise from the body, and also all of the physical symptoms that arise in your body are driven by thoughts as well. So when we have an effect, like sometimes we have a physical effect and that will remain in the body, but it can either cause a mental manifestation, I feel like,
Okay.
or it can continue as a physical manifestation. But if we treat them as exactly the same thing, which they are, because in any harm that's done to the body or any event that has caused harm, that all that's left really is the residue of that, or the tension of that. We can get it right down to basics and just call it attention.
Okay.
And so memory is tension. And once you release that tension, just as a simple like a massage or something, you can
Yeah.
relieve tension. If you sit and feel into that tension while you're meditating, for instance, it actually resolves. So from that perspective, it's like a preventative relief for illness and pain if you can resolve it at that level. And that's what you brought up earlier, that if you that this approach is really getting to the root of the problem and resolving it there. And you don't actually, thought is not required to feel. Thought is actually the only problem if you're trying to feel, because it's thought that is what stops you from feeling. So I don't know if that's made it clearer for you. If there's not, just come back at me with questions.
Yeah. I mean, I love that analogy about the sort of massage thing where they find those points and they get the right point and it just opens up and releases in the body. But I think the one question that was going through my mind is, so you mentioned, or you spoke about how the body is kind of the source of all, and I want to make sure I got this right. The source of all the thoughts
Mm.
is that how you frame? So everything that's
Yes.
going on around us and inside the body is basically triggering those thoughts, or triggering thoughts and the mind. And we're not entirely sort of aware of this. We think it's going on in the head, or the thoughts that are going through the head. I don't know if I've got that straightened, if I'm
Yeah, I can
understanding that
explain
properly.
it a little
Yeah.
bit if
Yeah,
you
that'd be
like. So
great.
yeah, so your body is like a sponge, really, isn't
Okay.
it? We've got the five senses, and then they can all come together and make the sixth sense, which is intuition and foresight and all of that kind of thing. So all of those senses, even though they're on the outside, they're all we've got so many in our head, so that makes us think a lot and activates the brain a lot, because we've got one, two, three, four, five senses in our head, four senses in our head. The last one is touch. So all of the way we operate in life is we're sensory creatures. So we pick up things, we touch things, we smell things, we hear things, we see things, and we speak as well. So all of this comes into the body, through those senses, and then goes deep, deep inside, and then your body naturally interprets or misinterprets,
Most of
or
the-
doesn't. It doesn't have to. As it comes in, comes with no bias whatsoever. It's when we start thinking about those feelings and sensations. So
okay.
all of those senses, it's really just a vibration through your ears, or a seeing through your eyes, but it's all information that just gathers in, like we're just a big sponge, and then we use that information to respond to a situation.
Okay.
So that's what
That's make
senses are. And is that starting to make sense
Yeah, it makes,
now?
so that's a great analogy. The sponge analogy. We're sucking things in all the time, and then I guess it's about how we process or over process some of
Mm.
those things, or overthink them. So some of us might be good at sort of sponging and squeezing, and it comes out, where others stay holding everything in the sponge and stay full, and then that affects sort of parts of the body. So we get stressed and shoulder pains and all those good things, and that's what's really going on there. And then we're looking for how we solve that, and sort of seeking out meditation or meditation practices
to help us to do that. But the approach that we've got at the moment is potentially wrong, in that we are focused on solving specific problems as opposed to a longer term approach, which is the undo approach. Have I connected the dots there?
I think so. Maybe go into that a little bit more, and then we can continue.
Yeah, so I guess some of us are potentially more can hold those sensory feelings more than others. So we can absorb things as a sponge more so than others, and may affect us more so than other folks, where some folks kind of suck it up and it passes through.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No. So I'll just explain. We all receive the same.
Yeah.
You cannot stop your senses working. The only thing you can do is numb it out through thought.
Okay.
Yeah. So you're still receiving it. Just because you don't respond or you don't have any feeling about it doesn't mean that it's not being received. So it appears that people can handle situations better than others, but they may be more numbed out than others, which means that they're not going to be as empathetic as somebody who feels a lot more, which then also means they're not going to be as responsive. So in, like in a business situation, that's why leaders are what they are a lot of the time, is because they're quite sensitive to the situation and picking up what's going on in a room, and they're able to understand how to manipulate or support or offer a solution to areas where there is disturbance in the feelings and the situation that's going on in the room.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's making any sense, but
yeah, I thought was that some of us are potentially better at letting go than others. But I think what I heard was that what we're actually doing is some of us actually numb, and we're not dealing with those things properly, and they are getting kind of caught up in the body and actually might be worse. So I think I was trying to understand a little bit more maybe about how we sort of process that information, overthink it sometimes, and then how we connect that to the mind and the body in the meditation to help kind of release those points that we were almost like the massage points that sort of release things. So
the best way I can explain it in terms of the body-mind connection, or bringing it back to the body-mind connection, is those tensions that I mentioned before. That's just information, and that's just information that you've received from the outside and also from the inside as well. But if you're able to get in touch with those sensations and resolve those feelings, then if you're numb, it's a lot harder to get in touch with those feelings. A lot of the work that we do just to get people started in this natural meditation is to teach them how to actually feel, because people think that they feel, but they're actually thinking about their feelings. They're not actually feeling. So there's no disconnection between the senses and what's inside of you. There's no disconnection. But as soon as you start thinking about that, there is that disconnection.
Okay.
I hope I'm not confusing you.
No, I think I'm probably approaching this like most folks do with meditation, where in the past we pick up an app, we don't fully understand what's going on here, and we're seeing it as another solution to deal with what's going on at work or the office, but we're not fully understanding how to really benefit from bringing a meditation practice into our lives. We're not taking the time to understand it, and I think that's what's beautiful about this conversation is good questions, but probably fairly basic questions that may be going through other people's minds. Like you used a great example in the white paper of Tom, and Tom is the typical business owner typical employee who's got a whole lot of stuff going on in their lives, and that's all sort of building up, and maybe we are starting to feel numb. I know as a business owner, as a CEO of a business, it's a lonely place, and it's not always easy to be vulnerable. So the stuff kind of, you sponge it all up, but there is no release. You start to feel numb, and then you look for, I guess, different ways to deal with it. So it could be alcoholism, it could be whatever sort of ism that you go down, depression. But how do we reconnect with those feelings? Is that what we need to be doing? And this idea of the body and the mind kind of coming back together, or the way you sort of term it, there's the disconnect between the two, and find that reconnection. I just don't think we fully understand what we're doing. Almost we're looking for a quick fix, and I think that's the beauty in what I'm seeing with you folks, is that this is a much longer term, or this is a more holistic approach to trying to help with the challenges we face as human beings at the moment.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the numbness that we're, and by the way, there's nothing wrong with being numb. It's just, it's not the optimal way to operate. That's all. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you if you are numb, or if you find out that you are numb. And it's, I mean, the thing is about this approach is nobody has ever told you this. Nobody has ever told you to feel your feelings. Everybody and the whole of society is structured to disconnect you from your feelings, to keep you distracted, to give you things that drug you out and numb you out. So it's perfectly understandable that people are numb, but there is a way. What we're offering is a way out of that. And as soon as you start to, unfreeze, if you like, or denumb, I don't really know what the word is, it just doing that is the beginning of the reconnection. And the only reason that we are numb is because we've been taught to suppress our feelings, and we've been taught how to distract from them. And we, like even as a child, you're told if you fall over and cut your leg or something, your parents are like, oh, you poor little thing. And then if you go on crying for too long and that doesn't suit them, they're like, oh, okay, be quiet now, you've cried enough, or whatever. But that event may not have been over for that child, and he or she may needed to have cried for longer to resolve the effect of the harm that had just happened to the body. So it's things like this as we go through life. This is constantly happening. And like you say, it just builds up and builds up and builds up and builds up. And until you learn something like what we're offering, people don't know how to resolve it. So there's only so much you can take. You're going to take drugs. You're going to go, listen to music and, dance all night and do, stuff to relieve some of the pressure. But as soon as you do understand that there is a way to feel, if you learn to feel your feelings and listen to your body and respond to your body, all it wants to do is be its optimal self. So as soon as you can get that thinking out of the way and give yourself that chance to recover, the body will your body literally just takes over. And then from that point on, you're living like from yourself rather than trying to stop yourself exploding or something. Once you learn to feel the feelings that are pressure or stress or whatever that's coming out, because the body's always trying to release, it's always trying to heal itself. That's just nature. You cannot stop that. So as soon as you learn to feel those feelings and be comfortable with those feelings inside of yourself, because it's feelings that drive us in every single decision that we make during the day. It's whether we like that feeling or not, whether we do an action or don't. So
it's so true. It is.
Yeah. So if you're comfortable with your feelings, then that means that your feelings aren't driving you to do things that you don't really want to do. And if you're comfortable with your feelings, then you'll know what your purpose is and what your vision is, and you're able to go in a direction that is perfectly aligned with you, exactly as you are, as the individual and unique person that you are, as opposed to being what I just said, that being driven to do things
Yeah.
that you don't really want to do, but you just don't know how to stop doing them, like smoking and alcoholism and all of that those addictive qualities that we get, that's all driven by a feeling in our body. So people are not taking their feelings or giving their feelings as much importance as they really need. People don't understand that it's a feeling that makes us avoid things or procrastinate or makes us not focus during the day, and we're not productive. So yeah, it's a massive topic you've brought up here.
How did you land up on the path that you're on at the moment?
Yeah, so, well, there's two stories there. There's this Matthew story and how he discovered all of this, and then I guess there's the story of how I got onto this, and then
Yeah.
I wanted to bring it to the world. So I don't know. Do you want the both stories or just
Yeah,
one?
give us both. So how did Matthew
All right.
kind of discover this or come up with this different approach? What led him to that? And then let's hear your story as well.
Yeah. So Matthew was a monk for 7 years, like a yogi celibate monk. He was serious, hardcore. And during that time period, so he was a monk for 7 years from the age of 18, 19, something like that. But when he was in the monastery, he was a troubleshooter. So he used to go around to all the different monasteries in Australia and India and just troubleshoot where they were having issues and, not getting enough people on board for the targets that they wanted to meet or whatever. So, it's big business. Religion is big business.
I never thought about monasteries having targets.
Well, I don't know if they did, but they certainly weren't happy with the lack of people that were coming. So they would send Matthew in and he would, clean up the mess. And so from that perspective, he's always been a troubleshooter.
Okay.
And then during about 4 years in, I think it was, his body started to have these convulsions and throwing off all of he didn't really understand it at the time. It was in hindsight, actually. He looked back and he's like, okay, that was my body throwing off all of these techniques and all of this thought-based brainwashing, as he terms it.
Okay.
And that's how he started to...
The techniques that are being used in...
Yeah.
In the... Okay. Yeah.
In the monastery, yeah. Like they're focused on a certain point in the middle of their forehead, and they're up at 4 o'clock in the morning. They're not allowed to have sex. They're not allowed to eat garlic. They're not allowed to eat onions. It's super strict and rigid. And from the moment you wake up, you have this basically brainwashing to stop yourself having any natural thought. It's got to be all about the religion.
Okay.
So, to reach enlightenment or whatever it was they're trying to reach. So that's how he started to understand the nature of thought. And then about 4 years in, all these convulsions started happening in his body. And then he's like, okay, maybe what happens if I don't think these thoughts? What's going to happen? And so he started sitting for the last 3 years in his own way. And because he was sitting for so long, he figured out that the pain in his body, like if he had a sore knee or something, he's just sitting there, just go, oh, what's going to happen if I just sit through this, and not react to it and not add any thoughts to it and not judge it or anything. So he sat, with a sore knee for just hours and hours, maybe days and days. And what he noticed was the pain would actually dissolve if he sat there with it for long enough. And as soon as the pain dissolved, he had a memory of an event that he'd had previously in his life that had an effect on him. And so he kept doing this. And so that's how he first understood the body-mind connection from a thought-based and a meditation-based perspective. But then,
so what he's doing at that stage is just sort of sitting down, going into meditation and not doing any kind of scan of the body or anything, just
not using any technique at that point, because he realized he was sort of realizing that the body convulsing and was throwing off the technique, it was throwing off all this thought that he'd been adding to himself.
And he can feel the pain in the knee, and he's just sort of conscious of it, but sitting in meditation or until
Yeah.
that pain starts to dissipate,
Yeah,
and then
meditating through it and
through
just
it.
feeling his way through it and deeply understanding that pain,
Okay.
if you like, not judging it, and there's no bias towards it, and he didn't know what it was about. But at a certain point, the pain would dissipate, like it would just literally,
Okay.
it just vanishes. And this has happened to me many times on retreat. And so from that, and then shortly after that, a memory would arise, like from literally nowhere. And
Is
all
that
that was
the body mind connection happening?
that's exactly right.
Okay,
Yeah.
getting it. Okay.
You got it? So the
Yeah.
pain is related to an event. That tension or that pain is related to an event. So as soon as the pain was resolved, the memory would come, and then you
Gotcha.
didn't think
Okay.
anything about it any longer, because that was like the last part, the off-gassing of the pain, and just giving him a little bit of understanding of what that was about. So the body is super intelligent. We so underestimate our bodies. And so anyway, so he ended up doing that for about 3 years, just trying to figure out what was going on. But during that time also, he started questioning the hierarchy, because he started seeing the hypocrisy in the order. And once he started doing that, they're like, nah, you better leave. So they kicked him out on the street with all his goods. No money, nothing. So anyway, he was very good at massage already and osteopathy. He'd been he had trained in that. And so he opened a massage clinic, and then set up like probably the biggest clinic in Australia. And then he was massaging like unbelievable amount. So like 30,000 people over
Wow.
probably a decade came through. But what he did notice was, after a year in or whatever, I don't know what the time period was, is he was massaging one person's shoulder, and they would start telling him about the problem they were having in their life. Next person would come in, he'd be massaging their shoulder. They'd tell them the problem that was going on in their life. Over time, he noticed every time he massaged their shoulder that there was a pattern there, they're all talking about the same thing. They've got a different story around it, but there is a pattern here. And this part of the body is associated with, like your shoulder is for reaching out. So, like the shoulder, I can't remember what they call frozen shoulder.
Yeah.
Whenever he was massaging the frozen shoulder, there was always this same pattern. So that's how he started understanding the body-mind connection. And also the results he was getting were astounding. Like, he was working with the insurance companies, and people who had been going to see physios were coming to him, and he was resolving what they had been trying to resolve for years in like 2 or 3 sessions. So he was definitely onto something. And so that's how he discovered it. And then after a certain point, people started coming to him and hanging out at his clinic and saying, when are you going to teach us to meditate? And he's like, well, I can't teach you the yogi approach. I'll have to teach a new approach, which was the natural meditation. And yeah, I don't know if everybody who went through that would have come up with the same thing he did, but he's just got this highly unusual way of questioning, and he's got a real critical thought, and he's very able to see things factually and logically, and I think it was all of that encompassed what he has led to the Undo app and his approach. But he also, whilst he was writing the app, he figured out there's 13 things that people don't understand that will get them stuck in understanding life and themselves, and it hinders their ability to problem solve literally anything. So that's what the Undo app is made from, those 13 things that people just do not understand.
So I'm curious, did he, when we talked about the cold shoulder, was he picking up patterns associated with those pains? So there's a pattern, while the stories are different, it's the same sort of root cause that, for example, is associated with cold shoulder. So Yeah.
And it all related back to what that physical part of your body does. So like with your feet, they're the foundational part of you. So anything that they were talking about with the feet, it's the foundation. The ankles, that's where you've got flexibility and moving forward in life. With the shoulder, it's where you're reaching out. And so if you're reaching out or overreaching and doing too much, then your shoulders get sore. Or if you're,
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
shrugging someone off, it gets frozen like a frozen shoulder. So if you're ignoring your husband or not giving yourself, or for the left, so the left side is for the feminine and the right side is for the
Okay.
male. So if you've got a cold shoulder on your right side, then you either it's going to be your father or yourself that you're giving a cold shoulder to. Your cold
Okay.
shoulder is like ignoring somebody,
And
not
if it's on
giving
my
them.
left side,
It's
so
probably the
well,
feminine side,
Okay.
or it can be the feminine side or the feminine aspect. So the feminine side is more the like the creative side, and whereas the masculine side is the brute force and the worker and
Okay.
the work sort of
Side
side,
of
or the
things.
more of the physical side, like physically getting into life. So
Okay.
I could talk about that for hours. Is the hips and the legs and all of those body parts, fingers. It gets really, really specific.
So
Yeah.
he picked up all these patterns, and
Yeah.
then you folks obviously sort of met somewhere along the line. But how did your journey start then, and the building of the app? How did you take that next step? What happened next?
Yeah, so I came to see Matthew as a client, actually, to start with, because
Okay.
I was not traveling too well at the age of around 27. I was, I was depressed and I had been on antidepressant. I'd been looking for solutions to finding out what was wrong with me. I always had a deep feeling inside of me that there was something wrong with me, but I didn't know what that was. And a friend suggested I go on these meditation retreats that Matthew was running in Perth, and so I came on my first meditation retreat, and I'd tried other meditations, and it's just like, I don't really know what they're doing, but it doesn't seem to relate to me, so I just didn't get it. And then when I sat on these retreats, it was like, oh, okay, this is what it's all about. So all the little
Pieces kind of clipped
tidbits,
together.
the
Yeah.
tidbits that you pick up along the way, and you're like, oh, and you just remember them. Like, I don't have a notebook or anything like that, but you
Yeah.
just remember things and they stick, and it's like, that doesn't make any sense, and this doesn't make any sense, but that's like really wise words, but I don't quite understand it. And then when I came on the retreat, it was like all those little pieces, the answers just got answered. And
Yeah.
so it was like, so for me, it just really resonated. And then that was really the beginning of my healing journey. And then a few years later, I was cooking for Matthew on his retreats, because I was a chef by trade. I was professional chef for over 25 years in high-end restaurants and things. And that was really stressful as well. So I wanted to, quieten it down a little bit at that
Yeah.
point, because it's very high pressure. So I ended up cooking for Matthew on the retreats, and then we got together, and then we started business, and we were running meditation retreats for the first 13, 14 years, I think it was.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And then we had a period where we were like retired. We had a property with a venue, running retreats and renting it out in between. And then we had 3 years off. And during that time, I noticed there was these meditation apps being, had come onto the market, and I was looking at them going, oh, wow, these are pretty light on, like with the understanding and information we've got, we could really make a difference to people in their lives. And also, once I had gone through my healing, it was really quite an intense period for 10 years. But as I started understanding things, it made me realize that we don't get taught this in school.
No.
And imagine if we got taught this stuff at school, rather than, I mean, sure, you've got to add up and you've got to know how to speak your own language and write things and all of that, but the life skills that you just don't get taught. And when you come to the end of your schooling years, you're like, oh, okay, so now I start life, but none of that's going to help me. So you're kind of starting all over again, aren't you? Unless you've had a, very wise, mentor, or, somebody within your
Yeah.
family who's been able to help you understand certain things about life, you kind of just left there to wander and figure it out yourself. So I just thought, well, be really cool to get this at least to the kind of adult population, and then hopefully
Oh,
we
I love it, to
can,
bring it down
yeah,
to younger
bring it,
generation down the
yeah,
line. So
yeah.
you've,
Because imagine if you were taught to feel as a kid, like you're
yeah,
only just learning now, but from my perspective, because I've been feeling for so long, the direction you can just the directions and the lack of fear that you have for life and sickness and pain and it's kind of unfathomable to
yeah,
you at right now, probably, because as soon as you learn to feel, you're not scared of yourself anymore. There's no discomfort of yourself anymore. So you have this real sense of nothing's going to stop me. And if it
yeah,
does, I know how to recover. So it doesn't matter.
yeah.
That's not meaning you don't be reckless with yourself. In fact, you're less reckless with yourself because you have a sensitivity to yourself. But that is just a totally different way to live. Completely different way to live your life.
So this approach has been decades in the making. The work that
Yeah.
Matthew's been doing, the work you've
Yeah.
been doing together, has been decades in the making. And ultimately, you've spent about 7 years building this application, bringing it all together. If I'm correct from
Yeah.
our
It
discussion
yeah.
before, yeah,
It took 2 years for us to write, and then we put it into the market, and then we realized it was too deep. People couldn't understand what he was talking about. So we had to lighten it and explain a bit more, and that took another 2 years to write. And then we got
okay,
it into the market, and then we kind of, ran out of money. So, shit happens.
as you do,
So, as you do. And then we got hacked, as you know. So
yes,
that was, we've rebuilt it on a different platform now, on a no-code platform. So we're back up
fantastic,
and running, but it's not what it was. But it's
yeah.
still, nevertheless, the all the chapter information and all, like the book, the 13 different aspects are all in it, and we'll build out the body mind section of it this year as well. Yeah.
So for somebody listening to this podcast, business owner, I mean, typically that's who our audience is, but business owner who's trying to find their way or thinking about taking the step into meditation, what's the best approach from a best starting point here? There are so many options out there. Where do you suggest they get started?
I would probably suggest they just try a few of them. But I would suggest to go into a little bit of depth. Like, try one and try it for a month or two, then try another and try it for a month or two, or until you know that that's not what you want. So
So
that
kind of
might
get
take 2 years.
curious.
Yeah,
Just
just get curious.
okay.
Yeah. And one will resonate with you more than another. And also the other thing you'd want to look out for is what actual effect is it having in your day-to-day, and is it making you feel better? Like, not in a like a happy, blissful way, but is it making a difference in the way that you do things? Not so much. Yeah, you want to go down to that deeper level, like, and really uh, see within yourself if it's making a difference to you, or is it just, like I said earlier, is it just something that you just have to add to yourself and you've got to sustain
Yeah.
externally? Because for me anyway, the beauty of this approach is you don't have to really do anything. It's literally just every day I'm just understanding myself. I'm not learning anything. I'm literally just listening to what my body says and reading that, and you just get better and better and better at that. So I would suggest you take notice of how much effort you have to put into it. And also
Okay.
when you're meditating, how do you actually feel? Because for me, when I meditate, it feels like a relief. It's like, this is my time. Whereas with other meditations, like, I've got to go do something, like you're just doing another thing. Whereas this is like you're undoing. you're not doing anything. Yeah.
It's because they've almost gamified it, so you want to keep up your daily streak and keep up your hours, and the apps are kind of pushing you to. It almost becomes a bit of a I've got to go and do the meditation thing because otherwise I'm going to lose my streak or whatever.
Yeah,
They've gamified it.
I mean, I get that people need a little bit of assistance with that. Yeah, because I mean, it is hard for people to set up, like a routine or do something for a long period of time. So I understand that. I mean, but there's good ways to do that, and there's not so good ways to do that. So I would also check that part out when you're checking out the apps as well.
So I'm about to. We talked before we started about using the Undo app and going through the Undo journey, and I'm about to embark on that journey. And I think you suggested sort of do it for 3 months and then almost redo it again for another 3 months. Is the journey structured that I'm about to follow? So I did listen to the first chapter where Matthew kind of talked through the process, but maybe just for the audience to give us a sense of what one goes through when we follow the Undo approach.
Yeah, so it's a really good idea to go through it like chapter by chapter, because one chapter builds on the next, and also it has been structured a certain way so that so you're learning things that like it just builds upon the next. So what you learned from the previous chapter, it's good to know that before you get to the next one. But within each chapter, there's like a light version, like a primer version, we call it. And then there's active meditations, which are the ones that you can, the audio is a little bit faster than a deep meditation. So there's active meditations plus deep meditations. The active meditations are actually ones that you apply to your life. So it's like an exercise, but in a meditation. And then you learn things and question things, and then you go out into your day, and then you apply what you've learned in the meditation to your day. And then the deep meditations are the guided meditations, where it's just really, really quiet, and just he guides you through a meditation, and you can set the different times for however long you've got. Sometimes you might only have 10 minutes, sometimes you've got 40. So so there's that. Yeah. And then there's a deeper, so this is all on one topic. Like there's reactions, there's judgment, there's feelings, senses, significance of illness, significance of pain, the mind myth, the body-mind connection. There's all of those, and stop harming yourself, which is one of the last chapters. And so all of these parts are in every single chapter. And then after you've got all the deep meditations, you've got a go deeper section. And then you've got a summary version at the end as well. So there's 5 different sections. So it's every chapter, it's super intense, honestly.
Yeah.
And that's why we say do a little bit and then go live it and go digest and come back and do more. And then again, because it's just layered and layered and layered of different depths of understanding. So some things you might not understand. So then you come back and do it again, and then you'll understand more again. And also by the time you've gone through it for 3 months, then you come back, you're very, very changed after 3 months. Come back in, do it again, and you're like, okay, now I know what he was talking about. Whereas the first time around, like I said to you before we started recording, it's so unconventional. It just changes the way that you think completely on its head. And the way that you've been taught completely on its head. But it really, why we also call it Undo is because it teaches you how to expose your beliefs and your conditions that are limiting you. So you've got beliefs that you're, throughout the day, that I'm not a good person, or I'm not empathetic enough, or I'm whatever your little story is in your head that's telling you that you're not good enough. Whenever that that this app will teach you how to challenge that and
Yeah.
understand yourself through that and find out where that's coming from, and then get you back to the feeling that is behind it again. Then once you can resolve that feeling and you can challenge those thoughts, then it's resolved completely. You move on. There you go. Your limitation's gone. So it's a very effective approach.
So there's a great book called Unlearn, which is about sort of unlearning some of the things that we've, I guess, become part of our lives and the way we operate and do things. And it feels like undo is kind of helping us to undo some of the sort of mental side and the thoughts that we've had and held on to over a period of time, and just kind of peeling those back and going layer by layer and slowly peeling back all the things that we've been tuned or I think you used a great term earlier, almost kind of indoctrinated, in terms of how Matthew went through that in the monasteries, where they kind of indoctrinate you into that way of thinking, and it's peeling that back. I've got one more question for you, which I sort of ask everybody who comes on, and you come from an entrepreneurial background, you run a business. What does freedom mean for you?
That's a good question. What does freedom mean to me? Being able to do what I want to do, whether that's good or bad, right or wrong, that's irrelevant. And not having the burden of questioning or doubt, or not having something in the background that's conflicting with what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So
I love it.
Like 100%. Okay, I'm doing this and I really want to do this and nothing is going to stop me. That to me is freedom.
It's freedom.
There's, you 100% aligned.
Yeah.
In all manner.
It kind of ties into what you were talking about with feelings earlier, and really getting in touch with those feelings and being able to not, I guess, let them hold you back, like having that feeling of free to do what you want to do without fear. And I think I was reading something the other day about a bird landing on a branch and being confident that if that branch breaks, I can't remember the exact quote, being able to open its wings and take off again. And I kind of got that sense as you were talking about that feeling of being free and being able to do something without fear of what might happen if it fails or doesn't work or whatever it is.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I hadn't even thought of the fear aspect of it. So that's a very good addition and really good analogy that you used there.
Cool. Yeah. So I'm going to go down the journey. Maybe what we do is reconnect in 3 months and see where I'm at. I'll take it seriously and I'll do it, and I'd love to, because I feel like I've touched the tip of the iceberg with you, and it's been a lot of learning for me today. But good. I really appreciate you coming on, Cate. And I think it'd be great, like, if I go through the process over the next 3 months and reconnect with you and we have another conversation and see where that goes as well.
Definitely. Yeah, that sounds great. That sounds like a really good idea.
Okay, let's do that. Awesome. Okay. Thanks so much for coming on.